In this chapter, we're going to look at jQuery plugins and user interface widgets. Basically, we're going to look and see how we can use tools that were written by somebody else to do some very common things that we might want to do with jQuery. So, jQuery plugins can be found all over the internet. For instance, there's a jQuery rotator plugin. Somebody did a search for it, and here is something at the jQuery plugin registry, which is a good place to go look. On the jQuery page, there is a plugin registry. If you pull up jQuery at their site, jQuery.com, and click on plugins, here is the registry for all the plugins that are registered with jQuery to do different things. There's animations and form plugins and plugins for using images and for responsive pages and sliders and Ajax and scrolling. There's all kinds of them. And if they register and they've been tested and work, they'll appear on this jQuery plugin registry on their website. So other places, obviously the jQuery plugin registry is a good spot to find plugins to use on your site. The whole idea of this is why write something, say you want to do a carousel of images that rotate. We've all seen carousels on pages. Why should you write it yourself? They're out there all over the place. You can use one of these plugins for jQuery to make your life easier. So Google Code will have jQuery plugins. GitHub, you can find some on GitHub, and you can find some on SourceForge. Some of the more popular plugins, Lightbox is huge. That's a huge one. It's integrated into a lot of other development environments too for the web. But Lightbox is one when you click on a picture, it pops up in a little dialog box basically with images and shading and a little 3D effect a lot of times with shadowing. So that you can look at a picture and then you can close it when you're done and go back to the page. So displaying images, Lightbox is very popular. Fancy Box, Thick Box, Color Box, there are other ones. Box Slider is very popular for doing carousels and slideshows. But also jCarousel is out there. That's a very popular one too. I am not familiar with Mouse Up jQuery Cycle 2. I'm not familiar with that one. There's also jQuery plugins for doing data validation, so you don't have to write all your data validation from scratch. So how do you use a plugin on your page? Well, I can't explain how to use every single plugin that's out there because there's thousands of them. They're just all over the place. So how would you do it? How would you want to go about it? And you will need to do that this week for your assignment. First of all, find the plugin site and study the documentation. The documentation will almost always step you through the process. Okay. It will step you through. It will tell you what CSS files you need, what script files you need, where things have to be located. And usually there's some example code for how to stick it into your web page. All right, so you don't have to write it from scratch. You can use their examples and adapt them for your use. Get the URL for the plugin files if they're available from a content delivery network. Or if they're not, you can download the files and you can put them in a folder on your website and access them that way. The most popular ones are all available through some kind of CDN site. Okay. Then go to the head element of your HTML and link any CSS files that are required. A lot of the plugins require certain CSS files to be used in order for their project to work and look the way you expect it to look. Okay. Then at the end of the body element, you have to code the script element for the JavaScript files that are required. Make sure whatever scripts come with the plugin, because they rely on jQuery, you need to make sure those scripts come after jQuery, and then any of your scripts come after that. Okay. If the download for plugin has an images folder, make sure that it has the right structural relationship for the CSS and JavaScript files for the plugin. So if their examples show all of the images for your, I don't know, maybe it's a carousel and they all have to be in a folder called carousel images, or they have to be in a folder called images located in a certain spot. You want to make sure you structure your folders the same way. So follow their example, code your HTML and CSS, and then if necessary, write the JavaScript and jQuery code that use the methods and options for the plugin. Again, you can get those from the examples that are usually included on the page. 2 cautions, I already talked about one. Make sure to include a script element for jQuery. You have to load jQuery before you load the plugin. Since the plugin relies on jQuery, jQuery needs to be loaded first, followed by the plugin scripts, and then if you have any other scripts, those have to be loaded as well. Also, be careful to look at the plugins and what versions of jQuery they use. Sometimes jQuery comes out with new features and they add things. In the plugins, it might be a version or 2 behind. So if you have problems with the plugin, check to see which versions of jQuery. You might need to use an older version of jQuery to get it to work. So here's an example for the box slider plugin. That's a carousel program. Here's an example. You have to load jQuery. So they're loading jQuery 3.111. And you also have to load boxslider.min.js. And in this case, they've stored the script file in a directory on their server called JS, which a lot of people do a JS folder to store all their scripts. So this one loads first, jQuery loads first, the box slider loads after that. So this is at the end of your HTML, you would add this. Okay. And then to get the HTML to work, this is like a template page that shows you how to do it. You need an unordered list, ID is slider, okay, and then you image, you specify where each of the images are. In this case, they're in an images folder, so you'd want to use an images folder. And they have an example with building 1 and building 2. Each of these list items in the unordered list has an image found in the images folder. They don't have anything for the alt. They do have a title, and they're probably using the front and left side to display some kind of caption. So you would want to follow this example. You can substitute your own images in here and your own titles, obviously, and you can put as many images as you want in here. There may be a practical limit. Again, that would be in their documentation. All right, and then you need to add this code inside your document loaded, your document.ready. Once the document's loaded, you'd have to call slider. This was the ID of this unordered list, okay? And you'd have to say .box slider, which is the method that was provided in their JavaScript file. And you'd have to specify the minimum number of slides, the max number of slides, their width, and their slide margin. And you would tweak these settings to work, so it works with your website and the number of images that you're using. And here's an example, one of their buildings that says left side, and there should be probably a front side in there somewhere. Okay. So that's box slider. Very few lines of code, very short JavaScript code. Examples of what you need to put in your HTML to make it work, and how to load the script files. Okay. Lightbox plugin. A Lightbox plugin is when you click on an image and it pops up this little box and you can kind of see through it a little bit, but the image pops up so you can get a bigger version of the image. There's the URL if you want to go to the Lightbox website and check it out. And here is an example of the Lightbox uses a CSS page. So in the head of your website, you have to include the CSS lightbox.css. You also have to include the script lightbox.min.js in order to use this, and make sure again you load that after you load jQuery. Here's the HTML for the images. Again, this one in this example isn't using an unordered list, it's using a bunch of anchor tags, and it's got some specific tags that you, elements to their tags that you have to include in order for it to work. Data-lightbox equals vecta, data title. So this is going to be the title for the image's front, and this one will have a left side for this image, building 2. Data lightbox equals vecta is in both of those, and you just follow this example. And you would end up with something like this. So you'd see the lightbox, you have a play button that would obviously get those to pop out and go through. So this is a box slider plugin for a carousel. Excuse me. This is the example for the lightbox back here. This is the example for a carousel, which we're going to see next. So carousel would kind of look like this, and it would rotate images. And this one, it looks like there's 3 images. So it'd go front, left side, maybe rear. We'll see in the code. And it would rotate through those 3 images constantly. So the box slider website is located here. Again, this one has a style sheet that needs to be loaded at the top. So you would see that in their documentation. It also has a script that has to be loaded after jQuery in order to get this plugin to work. Okay. And in this case, the box slider uses another unordered list, and each list item has an image. There we go, building 1 and building 2, and it has titles. Okay, and here's the jQuery that would do this. We look for that unordered list called slider, and we're going to run box slider on it. And here's an example of the settings that box slider can have. Do we want it to go automatically, true or false? Do we want the controls there, true or false? Do we want captions on? How many slides are there? What's the slide width? What's the slide margin? All things that you can tweak. Look at their documentation. Here's a Cycle 2 plugin for a slideshow. So all these different places that you can get these different kinds of slideshows, depending on what you prefer. Okay, so Cycle 2 website right here, jQuery.malsup.com, Cycle 2. It requires a script to be loaded. It doesn't look like it requires any CSS to be loaded for theirs to work. And here's an example of the code that you need to run in your site, and then you adapt it for your website. All right, we're going to stop there, and then in the next video, we're going to look at some more plugins that come straight from jQuery's website.